All right, I have with me Stephen Thomas. I'm thinking about every time we do this, just having a different kid with me, and that's what we're gonna do. I have the video playing on my Facebook page, so if you make comments, I should be able to see them. So go ahead and make comments. We're going to talk a little bit today about the history of Christianity. It's kind of what I studied, history major, so I know a little bit about history. And we're just going to kind of start at the beginning and go through it because there's been some claims that have been made that Christianity is an invention of the Romans to tax people. So let's just look at it and let's see what's going to happen. Around the year 2000 BC, it's like 1800 something BC, is when you have Abraham happening. So this is an ancient, it's all the way back to antiquity. Right? It's not something that was created in the BC, late BC, early AD era, all the way back to around 2000 BC. So Abraham goes and he's going to have his children and they're going to wind up in Egypt and they're going to be liberated from Egypt in around 1460 or so by Moses, 1465-ish by Moses. So then you're going to get to around 1000 BC, you have King Saul. And in the late 700s, or almost 600s, you have the Assyrian captivity, and in the 580s, around 580, you have the Babylonian captivity, where Israel, the northern half of Israel and the southern half of Israel is carried off into different captivities. So that's around the 6th century BC or so. Then you have Alexander the Great come along in the 400s, 4th century, 356 BC. Alexander's born, he dies 323 BC. So Alexander comes along and he's going to conquer everything. I mean, anybody who gets in his way, he just bowls them over and he conquers them. So 323 BC, the whole region is Greek. Right? Alexander has taken over the Mediterranean and all of the Hebrews are a tax-free state under Alexander the Great. That exists until a few years after he dies. Then you have the Seleucid kingdom, which is one of the kingdoms that Alexander's empire is broken up into. The Seleucid kingdom reigns over the region where Judea is, and that will happen from the late 4th century, early 4th century, early 300s, like 320 BC, up until 64 BC, when Pompey comes into Judea and conquers it. So Rome doesn't get control of Judea until 64 BC, and they get that by conquering the Greeks. Before Pompey, there is a Maccabean revolt, and that's how you get the books of 1st and 2nd Maccabees. So there's a Maccabean revolt. That's around 167 BC to 160 BC. So under the Greeks and under the Romans, there's all kinds of fighting. This says the live video is interrupted. Let's see if we can get it back. All kinds of fighting, always fighting. The Jews just do not like to have anybody. They don't like to have anybody reigning over them because they want to be serving God the way that they're called to serve God. So this is happening all through their history. All through their history, there is this desire to be set free. There's this desire to be liberated. And that continues up through the time when Rome takes control in 64 BC. There will be a Jewish revolt in 63. Do you remember the year, the Jewish war? Is it 66 or 63 BC, AD?
The one where the Rome invades Jerusalem?
Yeah.
66, I think?
66 AD begins the Jewish war, and that lasts to 73 AD. The ultimate result is that Israel is completely wiped off the face of the map as a nation. They're gone. And the temple is completely destroyed. In 70 AD, Rome wipes the Jewish temple off the face of the planet, and it's never been rebuilt since. In fact, there's a mosque now, the Dome on the Rock. There's a mosque where the temple used to be. So that's what's been going on. That's what happened. The Jewish war, then Vespasian comes in and conquers the Jews. His son Titus finishes the job, and that is going to get you into the end of the 1st century where Christianity and Judaism are officially separated. That's all important information, not just because it's right. It's important information because it completely dispels the idea that the Romans invented Christianity to control the Jews. The Romans didn't need to invent a religion to control the Jews. The Romans just killed the Jews. When you rebelled against the Roman Empire, they didn't play nice. They just came in and destroyed you. Right, back in the Punic Wars, when they were fighting the North African city-state of Carthage, they just went in and they wiped Carthage off the face of the map, and then they salted the earth. That's what they do in Jerusalem. When you read in the Old Testament, and it talks about Jerusalem or Judea being a land that flows with milk and honey, where there are clusters of grapes as big as a man. Now, when you look at Judea and you see pictures of it, it's like all dust and dirt. That's because of the Romans. You don't jack around with Rome. You mess with Rome, they kill you. And that's exactly what they did to the Jews. There's no subterfuge with Rome. There's no political machinations. That's not how they work. They are going to try and negotiate peace with you to their benefit. And if you reject that peace, they will just kill you. That's how they operated during the late Republic period and all through the imperial period until they begin to decline. But even then, they'll still try and kill you. So what you're seeing is not a weak nation when Rome comes in. In fact, it's during the most powerful time in Rome's history, the Pax Romana, where you have great emperors reigning over this long period of peace. And so this Pax Romana is during the time when Christianity begins. Rome didn't need to subdue the Jews. Rome didn't need Jewish taxes. In fact, as far as Rome were concerned, if there were no Jews, the world would have been a better place. They didn't really care for the Jewish people. And so this idea that they wanted the Jews to pay their taxes because they need them, there's really no basis for that in history. Now, if they're going to send troops to sit over you, they want you to pay. Right? Any group that is in control wants you to pay, and they did. So we're not saying that they weren't interested in taxes, but needing the Jewish taxes to the point that they invent this religion and pay some itinerant rabbi to go around and pretend to be the Messiah, that's not going to pan out factually or historically, especially when you consider that all the way back, as far back as Moses, you have people who are looking for the Messiah. You have people who are looking for the Messiah. Right? Moses promised that a prophet like him would be raised up amongst the people. So from that point forward, they're looking for the Messiah. When they were carried off into captivity, they're looking for the Messiah. The Romans are also looking for a Messiah-like figure. Virgil would call him the son of the gods come down in flesh, but they thought that was Augustus Caesar. So this idea that they create Christianity in order to subdue the Jews is there's no basis for it. Right? The Jews were looking for a Messiah. They knew he was coming. They knew exactly what he would be like, at least the fulfilled prophecy respect. And when Jesus comes, they categorically reject the Messiah. So if the Romans were trying to control the Jews by sending Jesus, they did a pretty bad job of it. The Jews completely rejected Jesus. And it wasn't because they could tell, oh, he's a plant. It was because he was telling them they don't get to rebel. And he told them to obey, not to rebel, and that's what they wanted. And so that all just doesn't pan out. As far as other things like the Romans messing up the calendar, that's not true. The Jews have their own calendar that goes back well past the Roman period, well past the institution and founding of Rome. The Gregorian and Julian calendars are easily reconciled, and so there's not really a messed up calendar. And so I don't really know what to say to a lot of the assertions that have been made, except that they're just not historically factual. And a lot of times it's more fun to come up with cool conspiracy theories because it seems like the world has been plotting to do these things when actually, truthfully speaking, when you go back and you read history, pretty much the way the Bible paints the picture is how it happened. Now, that doesn't mean that historians all believe in Christianity, but it does mean that serious historians don't reject the facts as they happened. And Christianity dealt with the historical facts very accurately. It dealt with the people, the places, the regions, all very accurately. And so to come along 2,000 years later and try to undo all that, it takes some pretty significant mental gymnastics. There's also this claim that the Jews don't try to convert people. I've actually been invited to synagogue several times. So they do try and convert people. Like anybody would. If I have a religion and I want you to be interested in my faith also, then I'll talk to you about it. The Jews tried to convert people in the first century. Jesus would talk about the Pharisees traveling across the nation to make a proselyte or a convert. And so it was common practice in the ancient world in antiquity, and it's common practice today for Hebrew people to be interested in bringing others into their religion. I guess that's it as far as the history is concerned. When you look through Roman history, Romans really, really, really liked to document things. And so when you look through Roman history, you can see just the straightforward line. The way the Bible presents the history is the way it pretty much takes place, the way it happens. And so we don't have to guess, I suppose is what I'm saying. And we don't have to rely on anything other than the facts as they're presented and as they're accepted by historians who look into these things and make it their life's work to study this stuff. There's no hidden history. You kind of got the long historical video, sorry. You're supposed to make cute faces and wave and stuff in the background. So, is there anything that you have to add?
No.
What about Daniel's statue? Do you remember Daniel's statue? It's actually Nebuchadnezzar's statue, but...
Oh, the one in the dream?
Yeah. You want to talk about that for a second? I kind of put you on the spot, but do you remember it?
Mm-hmm. It had the different levels with the gold, the silver, the bronze, and the clay.
And iron, and then the iron and clay.
Mm-hmm.
What were those? What were the different metals?
It was
Talk louder.
The Babylonians, then the Persians, then the Greeks, and then the Romans.
Right. So Daniel's dream
Mm-hmm.
in the 7th century, or Nebuchadnezzar's dream in the 7th century, predicted history, all the history that was going to take place. And so when the Greeks come, when Alexander comes to Judea, the Jews actually welcome Alexander and say, it was foretold in our prophets that you would be coming. And that's why he makes them a duty-free city, or a tax-free nation. Right? So none of that stuff surprised the Jews. They knew the Greeks were coming. They knew the Romans were coming. None of it was a surprise. That's pretty much it for today. All right, the video's a little longer than I like to do when we talk about stuff. But anyway, leave comments, and we'll talk some more tomorrow.